מסכת סנהדרין, דף מ"ה. היה רחוק מבית הסקילה 400 מפשיטין אותו את בגדיו. When the convict was 4 amot away from the place where he would be stoned, from the building that they're going to push him off of, then they remove his clothing. So remember, when he was 10 amot away, then we ask him to confess, so hopefully he did confess. Now he's only 6 feet away, and we remove his clothing. We stone the person naked, which is actually for his benefit. It's a way of being compassionate so that he will die more quickly and not be in agony and not suffer. If he's wearing clothing, the clothing will act as padding, and then it will take more time for the person to be stoned to death. So this is for a compassionate capital punishment. Ha'ish mechasin oto milefanav, ha'isha milefaneha u'machareha. Diber Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda says that both a man and a woman, if a woman makes a sin of capital punishment, then she gets stoned also. Both of them are stoned naked. But naked doesn't mean totally naked without any clothes at all, but rather for a man, we put a small cloth, a loin cloth on his front, just to cover up his genitals, and for a woman also we put a piece of cloth on her front and on her back so that they don't have to be shamed any more than they have to, but still most of their skin will be exposed so that they will die more quickly, which is compassionate to them, and their privates can be covered. Chachamim omerim ha'ish niskal arom ve'en ha'isha niskelet aruma. That's, however, Chachamim, the majority opinion, says that while a man is killed naked, presumably also with a small loincloth, that applies only to a man. However, a woman is stoned while clothed. It's more shameful to a woman to be unclothed, even if she's just wearing a little piece of cloth on the back and the front. That's not sufficient. For a woman, we leave her completely clothed, even though that may take a little longer for her to die. So there is a little bit more pain, but it's more shameful for her to not be totally clothed, and therefore we take that into account more than the little bit of extra pain, as the Gemara will discuss. Tenor Abanan, Haish mechasin oto perek echad melefanav isha shene perakim ben melefanah ben melachareha mipnei shekula arvad dibre Rabbi Yehuda. We have a braita that expands on the Mishnah and explains, for a man, we put a small piece of cloth on his front to cover up his privates. For a woman, 2 pieces of cloth, one in the front and one in the back, because all of that area is called nakedness, both the front and the back, not so for a man. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Chachamim omrim ha'ish niskal arom ve'en ha'isha niskelet aruma. Chachamim say, for a man, yes, he is stoned naked. He agrees with Rabbi Yehuda regarding a man. However, for a woman, no, not at all. We don't take off any of her clothing. Mai ta'amai hu d'Rabbanan. Amar kera v'regemu oto. Mai oto. Ile moto v'lo ota v'aketiv v'oseta et Ishahu or Taisha Hahi. So what's the source for Rabbanan? Because the pasuk says that we stone him, so it uses oto. Whenever the Torah uses oto or a masculine pronoun, sometimes it means a man specifically and not a woman. Sometimes it's just generic, that means everyone. So anyway, here he's taking it as a masculine and say, why a masculine? Does it mean that only a man gets stoned, but a woman does not get stoned? Meaning, even if a woman does a sin that requires stoning, she doesn't get capital punishment? But that's not true, because it says regarding a individual idolater that we take out the man or that woman who committed idolatry and we stone them. So here it's clear that women can also be stoned if they are guilty of that. So this oto is not coming to exclude women from capital punishment altogether. Elamai oto belo chesuto, haota bichsuta. Rather, the word oto means we stone him, meaning him alone, only him without his clothing. We just want just his body without anything extra. And so that's how we learn oto. So that refers to a man. A man we stone him, only his body, but not his clothing. But for a woman, that's not true. For a woman, we stone her with all of her clothing on. Rabbi Yehuda omer, oto belo kesuto, lo shena ish velo shena isha. Rabbi Yehuda says that the word oto, although it's a masculine, it's referring to all people. It's the same for everyone, and that means oto, the convict, man or woman, has to get stoned, they themselves, meaning only the body and not their clothing, and it makes no difference if it's a man or a woman. We're not counting the little loincloth that we put in front or in front of and back. That's just a little covering. But the point is that the stones have to hit the person's skin itself on the vast majority of their body. So that's the source. Now, although we just brought the source, that they could learn it one way or another, but there's got to be a reason why they chose to explain that pasuk this way or that way, and so maybe it has to do with the onlookers. Are they going to have sexual thoughts if they see a woman with barely any clothing on? So is that to say that the Rabbanan say we worry about arousal among the onlookers, even though she's being stoned to death? It's a kind of gory scene, but nevertheless, do we according to Rabbanan, we worry about that, and that's why Rabbanan say that no, for a woman is fully clothed because we don't want people onlookers to think anything. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says, no, we don't worry about onlookers being aroused. She's being killed. It's very gory, and we don't have to worry about what onlookers are thinking. They're not going to think sexual thoughts at a time like that, and therefore she can be almost totally naked. So if you say that's the reasoning behind their derivations and why one chooses to explain the pasuk this way or that way, the reason behind their laws, well, we have a problem because there's a Mishnah in Masechet Sotah that says the opposite regarding the Rabbi Yehuda and the sages. Nitnan hakohen ochez b'gadeha im nikreu im nifremu ad shemegale et liba v'soter et se'ara. If a woman is found to be a sotah, so part of the ritual is that the kohen will grab onto her clothing and pull it indiscriminately. And if it rips, it rips. And if it comes apart at the seams, it comes apart at the seams. And he has to pull it until he bares her chest. She's supposed to be degraded, shamed by this. And he also undoes her hair, dishevels her hair. So that's Chachamim that say we do that no matter what. Meaning, well, what about the onlookers? Look how she's going to be naked, half naked. So the Rabbanan says we don't care about that. We don't worry, since this is a shameful act. So the onlookers are not going to be aroused. We don't worry about that in the midst of such a degrading act. So Rabbi Yehuda Omer, im haya liba na'eh lo haya megalehu, im haya se'ara na'eh lo haya sotro. Rabbi Yehuda, however, disagrees, and he says if her chest looked nice, then the Kohen would not reveal it, and if her hair was beautiful, he would not unbraid it because that would actually make her look good. So we see that Rabbi Yehuda says we do worry about the arousal among the onlookers, even though this is a punishment situation, still people will think such thoughts. So this is the opposite of what we just saw. Both Rabbanan and Rabbi Yehuda here in this Mishnah say the opposite of what they just saw, what they just said regarding stoning. So how can we explain this? Amar Rabba hatam haynu ta'ama shema teseh mi betin zaka'a v'yitgaru ba pirchei kehuna. Rabba explains for the Rabbi Yehuda, the distinction is simple. In the case of sotah, we worry maybe she will be found innocent when she drinks the drink and nothing happens. So they say that means, she was innocent, and then she'll go home, and now the young Kohanim, they're the ones that have a front row seat right there, who saw her with her chest uncovered, they will be provoked, and then they may come and try to sin with her. She's a married woman, and so because she may very well stay alive, probably in most cases she does stay alive, then they will go and sin with her. So that's why the Yehuda says, no, if she's beautiful, then we leave her, cover it up. Miktela. But in the case of stoning, what are you worried about? There's going to be some onlooker who's going to be aroused when he sees her. So what? Then she's definitely getting stoned. Right? She's going to be stoned, dead, and buried. So there's no chance that anyone's going to sin with her. So what if they're aroused for a second? There's no follow-up. after that, so we don't have to worry. Now, you might still worry. Maybe the onlookers who saw this woman with her chest bared at the time of stoning, even though she is going to be killed, so she's not going to sin with that person, maybe they will be provoked to go sin with someone else. Maybe this person, once he's aroused, so then he can't be with this one, but he'll go and find someone else's wife or make a sin with someone else. So we should worry about that. But we don't, because Amar Rabba, same sage who answered the question before, also says, Gemire and Yetzer Hara sholet ela b'mi she'einav ra'ot. We have a tradition that the Yetzer Hara fixates itself only on the woman that a person sees with his eyes. So he only, in other words, he sees this person, this woman who's partially naked. He's going to fixate upon her and want to sin with her, and he may, go and violate. But if that woman is dead and not available, then he's not going to then go and sin with somebody else. The Yetzer Hara fixates on the person that was seen naked and not on another person, and therefore you don't have to worry about you don't have to worry about it in the case of stoning, but you do have to worry about it in the case of sotah, because she may very well remain alive. So that explains the distinction, according to the Biudah, between the case of sikila, where a woman also is stoned mostly naked, because we don't worry about that. She's going to be killed, so no one's going to sin with her. And between that and sotah, where she may live, and therefore the Biudah said, if she's beautiful, then we do not tear her clothing so much. Amar Rabba, the Biudah kashya, the Rabbanan la kashya. So Rabba asked, you answered the question according to the Biudah. You resolved the contradiction between the Biudah and the Biudah. But what about between the two statements of Rabbanan? Well, you didn't explain that. Ela Amar Rabba, the Biudah la kashya kedesh shanin. So rather, Rabba says after Rabba answers half of it, he says, okay, Rabba, the student of Rabba, says, I accept your answer that you just said according to the Biudah. That's totally fine, as you said. However, I'm going to answer also for Rabbanan name la kashya. Amar keda v'nivaseru kol hanashim ve'lo ta'asena kezimatrena hacha en lecha yisur gadol mizeh. So the pasuk says regarding sotah that she is disheveled and ashamed by having her hair loose and her garment torn. And the main purpose of that is to shame her so that all the other women that are looking will be rebuked and will not make a sin like that. So this is done as a deterrent. So with that, we need for the sotah ritual to be a deterrent for other people, and that's why, according to Rabbanan, we tear her clothing no matter what, even if she's beautiful, because the deterrent factor is more important than maybe an onlooker becoming aroused. No, you have to make a deterrent. The Torah says so. So therefore, we're going to do it no matter what. Whereas in the case of stoning, there's no greater deterrent than the person being killed. So yeah, for a man, if you want to do an extra deterrent and say, look, you're also going to be naked. For a man, it's not so shameful anyway. So that's not much of a deterrent. So, but for a woman, so yeah, we want people to be deterred. Not to do idolatry or break Shabbat or whatever, but the main deterrent is the capital punishment itself. And so since we already have a deterrent, we leave the woman clothed, right? Because you don't need any extra deterrent. For sotah, however, that's it. That's the main deterrent, because she may very well live. And then we still want to have the deterrent factor, just the fact that she's suspected because she went into a seclusion with another man after she was told not to. So she does deserve, even just for that, she does deserve something, and therefore we want to deter people from even doing that. And maybe you'll ask, for someone who's being stoned, it's good to have two deterrents. One is that she should be naked or almost naked, and that will be a shame for her. And then people looking at the woman looking at that says, "Oh, I don't want that to happen to me," and also that she will be killed. So it's good to have two deterrents. Isn't that better than one? Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Abba bar Abu, Amar Kera v'avta l'recha kamocha v'ror lo mita yafa. So now we have a very important and famous derasha of Rav Nachman, name of Rabba bar Abu. It says, "Love your neighbor as yourself." Okay, that has a lot of applications to treat everybody like you would want to be treated. But he has a surprising application that we should be compassionate to someone, even in the type of death penalty and the way that we apply the death penalty. Get a good death. What does it mean, a good death? Well, a death that has the least suffering and least desecration of the body, and for our purposes, the least humiliation. And so here's another reason why we don't, according to the Banan, women are stoned with clothing on, besides the onlookers and all that. It's because of the shame. It's bad enough that she has to get the death penalty. We don't need to add shame to it. We should do it in the best way possible. And so the best death penalty for a woman is that she should be clothed and not have to experience shame. For a man, it's different. A man doesn't experience much shame in being naked. Who cares? And therefore, for a man, it's better. A nice death for a man would be to have almost no clothing on, so that the death will be quicker. Now we ask, Lema de Rav Nachman Tana'ehi. So, do you want to suggest that Rav Nachman's principle is subject to a machloket between two Tana'im, Rabbi Yehuda and Chachamim, and that Chachamim say, "Oh, we worry about a nice death, and therefore we don't want her to be shamed, so leave the clothing on." And Rabbi Yehuda says, "We don't care about a nice death. We don't care about this application of Abtadcha Kamocha, and let her be shamed." Is that so? Does not maybe they disagree about this very principle? And we say, no, la dekule alma itlehud Rav Nachman. Hacha v'haka mipalgeh. Everybody, Yehuda and Chachamim, agree with this principle. Mor sabar bizyoneh di'inish adif aleh tefeh me niyacha degufeh. Mor sabar niyacha degufeh adif me bizyoneh. Rather, the Rabbanan, they think that a desecration of a person is better. What we mean by that is minimizing it is better than comfort of the body. In other words, minimizing shame, right? The shame of a person. We're talking about the woman here. Minimizing her shame by letting her be clothed is more important to her than the pain of the body, than the physical discomfort. So if you ask a woman, would you rather be clothed or not? She would say, I'd rather be clothed, because I don't want the shame. Yeah, but it might take another minute to die because of that. Says, okay, I'll handle. I'd rather have experienced pain for another minute or so and not be shamed. Whereas the Yehuda thinks that human psychology is not that way. It's the opposite. That physical comfort, a person would rather have physical comfort, rather even at the expense of degradation of the body. And so if you ask a woman, listen, it might be more pain. It's going to be more painful if you have clothing on. She says, I don't want pain. Forget it. I'd rather have clothing off. Okay, I'll be ashamed, right? It's the biggest shame is that you're being killed in public for capital punishment. So I'd rather be shamed and not have clothing on and die a quicker death. That's what Rabbi Yehuda thinks, and that's why. So even though they both agree with the principle, the question is, which one is a better death for a woman? And that's at the essence of their machloket. Next Mishnah. Bet hasikila haya gavoa shete komot. Echad min ha'edim dochafo al motnav. Nepach al libo. Hovcho al motnav. V'imet ba yasa. The house of stoning from which the convict would be pushed off of was the height of two ordinary people. So maybe about 11 or 12 feet tall. One of the witnesses would push him from his hips, and then he would fall to the ground. Now, if he was dead at that point, then that's it, they would leave him. However, if he was not dead yet, then he would have to throw a stone onto his chest, onto his heart. So if he was face down, then they would have to roll him onto his hips, meaning roll him onto his side, so that they could put another stone on him. However, if he was already dead, then that's it, they fulfilled their obligation of capital punishment just from the fall from the house, and they would not have to put a stone upon him. Ve'im lav, now, if he did not die from his fall, hasheni notel et ha'eben ve'notno al libo, then the other witness, not the one who pushed him off, but the other guy would take a stone and throw it onto his heart. Imet ba yasa, if he died at that point, they fulfilled their obligation. Ve'im lav regimato b'chol Yisrael shene'emar yad ha'edim tiyeh bo b'rishona lamito ve'yad kol ha'am ba'acharona. However, if he did not die, not from the fall and not from the first big stone, then all of Israel, all the bystanders, whoever is there, will stone him. As the pasuk says, the hand of the witnesses will be first against him to kill him, and then the hand of everybody else if he was not dead yet. Tana v'koma shelo harekan shalosh. A baraita adds on that if you add the height of the platform, which was the height of two people, and his own height, because he's not pushed off while he's sitting on the ledge, he's standing up. So that's another height of a person. So altogether, like from the height of his head to the floor will be like 18 feet. And if he would have a direct impact on his head, then that probably would smash his skull and kill him. Umi ba'inan kulahai. Urminhu ma bor shehu kedel hamit asarat tefachim afkol kedel hamit asarat tefachim. Now, why do we need it to be so high, 18 feet high, to kill him? We have a contradiction from a Mishnah Baba Kama that says a pit can kill someone if it's only 10 tefachim deep. 10 tefachim or more can kill someone. That's only about 3 feet. And so we see that falling into something that's 3 feet deep doesn't always, but has potential to kill someone. So why? So we learn from there that anytime you have a fall of 10 tefachim, potentially that could kill someone. So why do you need 18 feet when 3 feet would be sufficient? Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Abba bar Abu, Amar Kera v'abtal recha kamocha beror lo mitayafa yachi lig behe tefe mishum demin naval. And so we explain, based on what the statement we already quoted earlier of Rav Nachman in the name of Rabba bar Avu, that pasuk says, love your neighbor as yourself. That means give a compassionate death. And so if it's only 3 feet, probably he's not going to die. He's just going to bruise himself. And then we're going to have to put a stone, and then we're going to have to do more. It's going to be a prolonged death. So a compassionate death is one that's quick. So quick is higher, from 18 feet. So likelihood is he'll die from the fall, and then that'll be a compassionate death for him. Now we ask, if so, why not make it even higher? Make it 100 feet, make it 200 feet. At some point it doesn't matter because his velocity won't be, because of air resistance, he won't get any faster than 60 miles an hour. But you can make it a very tall building so that at least he'll reach that maximum velocity, and then more likely he will die just from impact. And the answer is no, we don't want him to be disfigured. Part of giving a compassionate death is that the body, structure of the body should be intact, because a person is made b'tzelem Elokim. Even though that doesn't mean literally that Hashem has a shape of a human body, but the point is that the human body is itself b'tzelem Elokim, is a holy vessel, and therefore we want to kill the person without disfiguring the body. So we do just right. The height of 3 people is most likely to kill him and least likely to disfigure the body. Any less than that, the person may not die. Any more than that, the body will be disfigured. Echad min ha'edim dochafo. The Mishnah taught that one of the witnesses pushes him. So now the Braita expands and says, how do you know that you're supposed to push him? How do you know that pushing someone off of a cliff is considered a form of sikila? Well, we learn that from the warning that Bnei Israel should not come up to Har Sinai. They should not come up, they should not touch Har Sinai, because anyone who does will, Pasuk says, Sakol yisakel o yaro yiyare. They will surely be stoned or surely be thrown down. That's what yaro means. And so we see that being thrown down off of the mountain is equivalent to a form form of sekila. So that's how we know that we push him off. Now, how do you know that you also put stones on him? Because the pasuk says, then, sakol. So we see that both actions are a fulfillment of this type of punishment. Now, how do you know that you should do both if he doesn't get killed by the first and you do the second? Because this pasuk, again, from Har Sinai, mentions both side by side. Now, how do you know that if he dies just from pushing him off of the building, then that's sufficient, and you don't have to put stones upon him, because it says, or do this or that. It doesn't say sakol yisakel ve yaro yeyareh. So you can do just one if that's sufficient. If not, then you do both. Now we know that was true from regarding Har Sinai. Maybe that was a one-time only type of punishment for the specific occasion. How do you know that this applies to in future generations when you want to give punishment of sikila? Tamod omar sakol yisakel, from the double language, sakol here, and in the future also yisakel. And it's done in the same way through a combination of pushing off and throwing stones. Ve'im lav ayda sheni notel et ha'eben notel, v'atanya Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar omer, eben hayta sham masoy shene ben adam, notna ve'notna al libo, imet ba yasa. So the Mishnah says that the other witness, the second one, picks up the stone and throws it upon his heart. What do you mean picks it up? The Baraita says, according to the Bisham ben Elazar, there was a stone that they placed there. They had a stone set up because they don't want to. Let's say they push him off and he doesn't die. Now you have to go find the stone. We don't want to delay it, and so there's a stone ready to throw on him in case he didn't die from the fall. So this stone that they had ready was a big one that required two people to carry. One person would not be able to carry it, and then he would pick it up and cast it on the heart of the convict, and if he died from that fulfills it. So we see here that the stone is very heavy. So how come the Mishnah says that one witness picks it up? How could one witness pick it up if it requires two people to pick it up? So the answer is with a question. This is, well, your question is actually an internal contradiction within this Baraita, because the Baraita says that you need two people to carry it, but then it says in singular, notla, he picks it up. It doesn't say notlim ota v'notnim al libo. It uses only a singular. So how can you explain this Baraita itself? Rather, what it means is that two people lift it together. You need two people to lift it together, but then only one person, the second witness, will throw it so that it will fall with precision. The idea is that you need two people to lift it up, but then one person will let go altogether, and the other person can hold it up just for a second and be able to aim it and throw it down. It's easier for one person to precisely aim it, and he can hold it just a second, just sufficiently to throw it in the right direction, and it will have more force that way. Ve'im lav regimato v'chule. Now, if that doesn't kill him, then everybody who's around picks up stones and they finish off the job. Hold on, we have a Baraita that says they never did a person repeat the stoning. It never happened. The person always died either from the fall or from the big stone, and there was never a second stone thrown. Mi kamina da'abid, I miserich kamina. Oh, did the Mishnah say that they did it? The Mishnah is just saying theoretically, if the person would not die, then other people would stone him. It's not saying that this ever happened, and in fact, never in history was it required to add more stones. Amar mor, ben hayta v'chule, v'atanya, achat even sheniskal ba, v'achat eisenit la ala, v'achat saif sheneherag bo, v'achat suda shenechenak bo, kulan nikbarin imo. So you just said in the Braita that there was a special stone set aside that in case they needed it, if the person didn't die from the fall, they would get the stone and they would throw it on top of him. How could it be that there was a specific stone set aside? We have a Braita that says the stone stone that was used for stoning and the wood that was used for hanging, the pole, or the knife, if he was beheaded, that was used for killing him, or the handkerchief that would be used in a case of strangulation. Whatever item was used was buried with the convict, which is an interesting law, why that it was buried with the convict. One possible reason is that it should not bring shame to the person, that if this was around, everybody would say, oh, look at the stone. Oh, that's the stone. Who was killed? That person, and that person, he was killed with the stone. So we don't want to bring any further posthumous shame. So we bury the stone with him. Or maybe it's to kind of remember this person forever. This person was stoned, if anyone should ever find it in the future. And in any case, the point is that we bury it. And so how could you have the stone set aside and ready if you bury it? And the answer is, no, it means we bring another one in place of the stone. So we have a stone there, and if we use it to kill this particular convict, then we bury that stone with him. And then for the next time we might need a stoning, we bring another one to replace it and set it aside in case we need it for that procedure. Nikbarin imo vatanya and nikbarin imo. You said that we bury these items, the stone or the sword, with him, but there's another baraita that says they are not buried with him. How do we reconcile these two baraitot? Amar papa, my imo betfisato. What does it mean with them? It doesn't mean literally with him in the coffin with the convict, but rather within his grasp, nearby. Just a couple of feet away. We put it not where his body is exactly, but right nearby. Amar Shemuel, Nikte'a yad ha'edim patur. My tama debe'ena yad ha'edim tiyeh bo barishona veleka. Shemuel has a ruling that if one of the witnesses had his hand severed from after the time that he gave the testimony before the execution, then the convict goes free. Why? Because the pasuk said that the hand of the witnesses will go against the convict first. The hand he's going to be the one to push him off or to throw a stone on him. If he has no hand, then the witness cannot do the execution. If the witness cannot do the execution, we cannot fulfill the verse, and therefore the convict goes free. Challenge to Shemuel. Are you telling me that, let's say, the witness from beforehand, even from before he witnessed the crime, let's say he already then was missing a hand. So a person who's missing a hand cannot be a witness to begin with? That's not true. No. In this case, that case would be different because the pasuk says the hand of the witness. So whatever was there before, we'll consider that the hand. If a person had just a stump beforehand, that's his hand. So as long as he had that before the testimony, then he can continue, and then we will kill the person. If he physically can't do it, okay, someone else will come and push him off. So he can be a witness if he didn't have a hand beforehand. However, if he had his hands fully intact at the time of testimony, and then he lost a hand after that time before the execution, then the person goes free. Challenge to this. That let's say you have someone who's convicted of capital punishment in a bet din in New York, and for some reason they don't get a chance to give him capital punishment, and then he goes and he's found somewhere in Chicago, and then two witnesses come and say, we testify regarding this person that he was convicted to capital punishment in the bet din in New York. And Mr. Cohen and Mr. Levy, they were the two witnesses. Then we kill the person based on that testimony. Now, here it seems that Mr. Cohen and Mr. Levy aren't around because it's two other witnesses that are saying, we happened to be there in New York. We were in the courtroom and we saw that this person was convicted. But those are guys not around, so it seems that you can give capital punishment even without the presence of the witness of the original witnesses. So certainly you should be able to give capital punishment if one of the witnesses lost a hand in the meantime. Okay, so what? He lost it. Even if he wasn't here, someone else could do it. So certainly if he's here and he lost a hand, someone else should be able to do it. And the answer is to the Gemara Shemuel, Behen Hen Aidav. Shemuel explained that Mishnah Masechet Makot is only talking about a case where the very two witnesses, Mr. Cohen and Mr. Levy, who were testified against him in New York, they're the same ones who testified against him now in Chicago and said, oh, we were there, we were the witnesses. And so they would then perform the capital punishment themselves. They have to be there, and that fits with Shemuel, that they have to be the ones to do it. And therefore, if they're not there, or if one of them lost a hand, then the person goes free. Now, this statement of Shemuel seems to suggest a general rule regarding interpreting Pesukim, that you have to fulfill a Pasuk exactly as written. That's this phrase, Ba'inan kera kedichtiv. We have to do the verse exactly as it's written. And you can't say, well, I can't do it exactly this way. I'll do something second best. I'll do it nearby. I'll do the best I can. No, there's no estimating. There's no substituting something that's similar to it. You have to do it exactly, like in this case, Yad Ha'edim, the hands of the witnesses have to push him off. And if you can't do it exactly like that because they have no hand, then you can't use a leg. You can't do something else. You can't use another person in second best. You have to do it exactly. That's what Shemuel seems to say. But is that principle true? Now we're going to see a few cases this way and that way. We're going to try to prove that whether this is a general principle that you have to fulfill a pasuk exactly or not. We're going to conclude that's machloket Tanaim. V'tatanya. Here's a braita that says, Mot yumat makero seyachu en li ela b'mita ketuba bo minayin shem en ata yachol lahamito b'mita ketuba bo she'ata mito b'chol mita she'ata yachol lahamito t'modomad mot yumat makeh mikol makom. The pasuk says with double language, he shall surely die, the one who smote him, because he is a murderer. Now, why do you need these extra words? So I know that you give someone capital punishment with the form of capital punishment that is designated for him by the pasuk. But what if you can't do that form of capital punishment for some reason? Let's say he requires stoning, but we don't have any stones here. We have no buildings here. We're out in the middle of the desert. So how do you know that you can kill him in a different way? If you can't stone him, then maybe you could chop off his head. A murderer generally gets his head chopped off. So what if we don't have a sword around here? So can we strangulate him instead? How do you know that? Yes, you can do that because the pasuk says mot yumat tamakeh. The double language says you kill him in another way, if not the first way. What do we see here? That you don't have to fulfill a pasuk exactly as written. The pasuk is giving the ideal, right? If you can in any way possible, then give this person capital punishment in this way. And if you can't, okay, so then give him a different one. The point is that he should die, so you can't do this one, do another one. So that goes against the principle that we assumed Shemuel holds by, that you have to follow the pasuk exactly. So we answer, Shane hatam damar kera mot yumat. No, this is an exception. Because the pasuk says mot yumat in double language, it says that comes to include any way that you want. But if not, then you can't just substitute on your own one for another. So actually the principle is left standing, that in fact you have to do the pasuk exactly. Now we ask, why not use this case of murder as a paradigm and learn from that to all other laws, that any time you have a pasuk and you can't do it exactly, so you do it in the second way. And that would mean also, like our case, if a witness doesn't have a hand, okay, so then find a second way to do it, right? Do it with, let someone else do it. Find a different way to push him off, and you still and you still perform capital punishment and not let him go. And this will be a paradigm, and we learn from here a binyan af to all other cases. And the answer is mishum dahavar osech v'kol adam shnei ketubim b'im ke'achad v'chol shnei ketubim b'im ke'achad em melamedim. No, this is not the only case that's an exception. This is a case of murder, and also the blood redeemer. If someone kills someone else by mistake, then a relative of the victim has a right to go and kill the accidental killer wherever he is, unless he goes to Ir HaMiklat, sanctuary city. And we're about to see in the next source, that's another example where if you can't do it the original way, you can substitute another way. And so now we have two examples where the Torah goes out of its way with some extra words to say, in these cases, you can substitute a second best for the first if you can't do it the precise way. But if you have two examples of something, then why is the Torah giving two examples of something if it will just give one? And you can learn from that to all other cases. So whenever the Torah says something twice, it means it applies only in those two cases, and we cannot use those two cases as a paradigm for anywhere else. So that's what happened here. So let's see the other case. So let's say Achad Amaran. We just saw mot yumat means that you kill a person. If you can't do it in the ideal way, you do it in the second best way. Goel Adam, ma'hi detanya. Goel Adam yamit et harosech. B'sva b'goel Adam minayin she'im en lo goel, shebetim ma'amidin lo goel, shenemar bepigo bo mikol makom. The Goel Adam, what's that case? It's what it says in the Braita, that the Redeemer, the blood Redeemer, will kill the accidental killer. So the ideal mitzvah is with a relative of the deceased, of the victim, and he will be the blood Redeemer. But what if he doesn't have a blood Redeemer? What if he doesn't have a relative? So then would we say, well, there's no blood Redeemer, so now the guy who killed Bishogeg doesn't have to go to Ir Miklat, he can just live at home because no one can kill him? No, we don't say that. Rather, Bet Din will appoint someone to be a blood redeemer. And how do you know that that's true? Because the rest of the pasuk says, right, whoever finds the blood redeemer shall slay the murderer when he meets him. Bepig obo. What do you need those words for? How is he going to kill him before he meets him? Of course, it means when he sees him, then he can kill him. So those extra words come to teach in any way. If you can't do it with a relative, then we appoint someone. It's a funny job that the Bet Din says, listen, we need your help, right? We appoint you. You have to be on the lookout for this guy. Anytime you see him, you have to go kill him, right? That's his job. You shouldn't have trouble with this. How could you just appoint someone to go and be a blood redeemer when he's not actually a relative? Okay, so there's a whole discussion about that. In any case, we have here a second instance where the Torah goes out of its way and adds words to say, if you can't do it in the ideal way, then you can do it in a different way. So those are two examples, but because there are two examples, we cannot learn a paradigm of Binyan Av to any other examples. Everywhere else in the Torah, you have to follow it precisely, and this now supports Shemuel again, that has to be Yad Ha'adim, they have to have hands. If they have no hands, then the guy goes free. And now we're going to try to prove the other way around. Mordekashisha, the son of Chista, ta'es Rav Asher. Don't we need to follow it exactly? I have a proof for this principle that you have to follow something exactly. V'hatanan, the Mishnah in Sanhedrin later on. היה אחד מהם גידם, או אילם, או חיגר, או סומה, או חרש, אינו נעשה בין סורר ומורה, שנאמר ותפסו בו ולא גידמים, והוציאו אותו ולא חיגרין, ואמרו לא אילמין, בינינו זה ולא סומין, איננו שמקולנו ולא חרשין. Regarding the law of ben sorer and more, where it says the parents, if he sees that they have a rebellious son, then they have to bring him to the court. So the Mishnah teaches, what if one of the parents is missing a hand, or is mute, or lame, or blind, or deaf? In any of those cases, then the boy will not be a ben sorer moreh. He will not get the punishment of ben sorer moreh. You cannot fulfill the procedure. Why? Because the pasuk says that the father and the mother will lay hold of him. They have to grab him. Well, if they don't have, one of them doesn't have a hand, they can't grab him. And it says they will take him out. Now that means they have to pull him out. So that means they have to be able to walk. If they are lame, then they cannot take him out. And they have to say, right, to the court, this our son is not listening to us. So if they have to be able to speak. If they are mute, then they won't be able to speak. And they have to say, this, our son here. Anytime it says the word zeh, the rabbis understand that as something in front of you that you can point to and see. So they can't say benenu zeh if they can't see. So if they're blind, we don't apply it. And they say, this, our son, he is not listening to our voice. So listening to our voice means that they can't be deaf because they have to be able to hear that the son says, no, I'm not listening to you. And so if they can't hear, then they cannot say, he's not listening to us. Okay, my ta'ama, lab mishum deba'inan kirati kedichtiv. Now, this Mishnah, why is it being so particular? Right, so what? So they'll say they can't grab him. Okay, so get someone else to grab him. Grab him with your other hand, right? So all these things, you could find a way to do so, right? He can't, he's not listening to our voice. They say this. Okay, write it down instead, right? Have someone else say it for you. So all these things, we don't say second best, but rather they have to do it precisely as is written. Otherwise, the law won't apply. So isn't this a proof that we need to follow the pasuk exactly as written? And we answer, La shane atam dekule kerayit terahu. That case is different because the whole pasuk is extra. Why need to tell me that they come and grab the son and take him to court? Well, if he's going to be tried in court, he's going to have to get to court somehow. So someone's going to have to bring him to court, right? So you could have skipped the whole pasuk, and then we would have known that somehow they're getting their son to court. Why do you have to tell me all the details? So this whole pasuk is extra to teach me that you have to do it precisely. But maybe this is an exception where, since it's an extra pasuk, that's what we have to do precisely. In all the other cases in the Torah, maybe you don't have to do precisely. Tashema. Let's bring another proof. En la rechov en naasit nedachat. David Rabbi Ishmael. Rabbi Akiva omer en la rechov osin la rechov ad kana peligi ela demosa barechov ad mikara ba'ina demosa barechov ad dehashtaname kedeme ikara dame aval dukula amma ba'inan kera kedichtiv. So we have a proof from the case of an idolatrous city, Oyed Hanidachat, where the Baraita teaches, expanding on the Torah. Torah says that we take all the spoils of the city. If it's found that this city is an idolatrous city, then you take all of their wealth and you bring it into the city square and you burn it there. So that means it has to have a city square. If it doesn't have an open city square, then what do you do? So the Rabbi Ishmael says, if there is no city square, then you cannot make it in a dachat, because the pasuk says that you have to burn it in the city square. So if you can't do it, then you can't. Then if it doesn't have a city square, then we cannot apply the law. So you see, the law has to be done precisely. Otherwise, you'd say, well, if there's no city square, okay, so we'll burn it in someone's backyard. We'll burn it outside the city. Whatever, we'll find a place to burn it. No, it has to be done precisely. Rabbi Akiva says, if there's no city square, then you can build one. So that's what they would do. They would come build a building company, build an open area in the center of the city, and then they would burn it in there. So that's what Rabbi Akiva says. So you see, this machloket is only about that one opinion says that when the Torah says it has to have an open city square, that means it has to be there all from the beginning. Rabbi Ishmael has to already be there. If it's not already there, then the city is exempt. Whereas Rabbi Akiva says it doesn't matter if it was there before or if we make it, as long as there is one there at the time that we burn it. So we can build it now, and that's also fine. But the common denominator between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Ishmael is that they all agree that you have to have a city square in order to fulfill the law of Irani Dachat, meaning that we're following the pasuk precisely. You can't just say, well, there's no city square, I'll burn it somewhere else. So in this is a good proof that you do need to follow the Torah precisely, and you can't do a second best. And the answer is Tana'ehi. In fact, it's machloket Tana'im. Teitnan, en lo bohen yad, bohen regel, ozen yamanit, en lo tahora olamit. Rabbi Eliezer omer noten al mekomo v'yoseh. Rabbi Ishmael omer noten al simolo v'yoseh. Here we're talking about a mesorah. In order to be purified, part of the process is that we put blood and oil on his right thumb, his right big toe, and right ear. So this is a Mishnah Masechet Negaim that says, let's say he doesn't have a right thumb or a right big toe or a right ear. It's missing. It was got cut off. So according to Chachamim, the Tanakh Kama says, this mesorah can never be purified if you cannot follow the Torah's guidelines precisely. And since he has no thumb, you can't put it on his right thumb, then therefore he cannot be purified. Okay, poor guy, he'll just never be purified. Whereas Rabbi Eliezer says, well, we do second best. If he has no thumb, we'll put it on the place where his thumb was, on the stump. He has no ear, so we'll just put it near wherever his ear would have been. You put it in the closest spot. Rabbi Shimon says, if he has no right thumb, put it on his left thumb. No right ear, put it on his left ear. And you do second best. So we see that, according to Tanakh Kama, you have to do it precisely as the Torah says. According to Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shimon, if you can't do it exactly as the Torah says, then you do it nearby. You do a second best. As machloket, which one is second best? But you can replace it with another, and you don't have to do precisely according to the literal wording of the Torah. Next Mishnah, Kol haniskalin nitlin. Anyone who gets stoned is also hung afterwards. They get killed by stoning. The hanging afterwards is to display the person as a warning to everybody else. It's taken down by night nightfall, so it's not there for a long time, but one has to do so. So according to Rabbi Eliezer, this applies to those who are stoned specifically. Other types of punishment will not be hung. Hachamim omerim eno nitle ela hamegadef ve'abed avodah zarah. Hachamim say, no, we only hang someone who is a blasphemer or an idolater. These are very, very bad things. And this person deserves that shame and that warning to everybody else. But any other sins, even if they deserve sikila, are not hung afterwards. Ha'ish tolinoto panav kilape ha'am va'isha paneha kilape ha'etz. The Rabbi Eliezer says that if it's a man, then we hang him and his face facing the people, whereas a woman, we put her face towards the pole, and so only her backside is seen. So the point of putting the face of the man towards the people is the people should see who it is and say, oh, I can't believe that guy did that. And then it's more impactful when you see the person's face. But for a woman, and for the sake of modesty, we only show her backside. According to the Chachamim say we only hang a man, but a woman, even if she is a blasphemer, she gets sikila, but she does not get hung. Amar lehen Rabbi Eliezer, v'halo Shimon ben Shatach tala nashim be'Ashkelon. Rabbi Eliezer says, but we have a case of Shimon ben Shatach. He hung many women in Ashkelon because they were accused of being witches, sorceresses, and so he killed them. He had them killed and he hung them. So that's a proof that you can hang women. I just say that you put their face to the wall, to the tree. But Hachamim answer him, says, no, that case of Shimon ben Shatach was an exception. We also learned that he killed 80 people, 80 women on one day. So, but there's a law that we do not give judgment to two capital cases on one day. Each requires its own concentration, its own day to deliberate on. So the fact that Shimon ben Shatach did that, of course he knew this law, means that this was extraordinary circumstances in which he had to go above and beyond the law for the sake of that time. Et lasot lashem. So he had to do something as a hora'at sha'ah only that time. So just like he killed many people on one day, which is not the official law, so too he hung these women, because even though that's not the official law, because he felt like he needed to do that as a deterrent for emergency circumstances. But that is not generally the law. Generally, we do not hang the woman at all. Tenor banan vehumat vetalita yachol kol hamumatin nitlin tamudomar ki kelat Elohim talui may mekalel zeh shebesekila of kol shebesekila devirei Rabbi Eliezer. So now we derive each of these laws. Rabbi Eliezer learns it from the pasuk. This is all the Braita expanding on and Midrash Halacha. The pasuk says you kill the convict and you hang him. So does that mean that anybody who's killed is also hung? If you had only those two words, we would assume yes. But the continuation in the next pasuk says, because the curse of Hashem is hung. The idea here is that when you hang a person, it's the one way of interpreting this is that the human body itself is a representation of Hashem. It's Selim Elokim. And so this is a curse because the person is being hung. And so this will be as if a curse to Hashem, that someone that looks like Hashem is being hung, something like that. Anyway, that's one interpretation. But here we're interpreting it differently. That says, since the curse against Hashem is being hung, so just like a curser, a blasphemer, their punishment is with stoning, so too anyone whose punishment is stoning will also get hung. So that's what we learn. If we had only two words, we would say anyone who gets killed is hung. But when it says ki kilat elim talui, we say specifically someone who's a blasphemer, not only a blasphemer, anyone like a blasphemer, in that they get sikila. So that's how Rabbi Eliezer says anyone who gets stoned also will get hung afterwards. Hachamim, however, they learn from the same pesukim, and they also say, if you had humat v'talita, you'd say everybody who gets capital punishment gets hung. But then when it says ki kelat Elohim talui, that means it's a blasphemer and someone like the blasphemer, not anyone who gets the same punishment as a blasphemer, but rather anyone who denies the basic principle of Hashem. And the blasphemer does that by saying, by cursing Hashem. And also, this might include an idolater. If he's following some other idol, then that's denying the fundamental principle. So he does not include all people who get sekila. Now, what's at the root of their machloket? Rabbanan shekelale uperate, Rabbi Eliezer darish ribuye umiote. It's different exegetical rules. Rabbanan are using klal uprat, like Rabbi Ishmael does. Rabbi Eliezer is using ribuy and miut, like Rabbi Akiba does. Both of these are dealing with a case where you have a general statement and then a particular example, like if I say, get me a drink, apple juice, right? So you have a general and a particular category. The question is, how do you balance them out? It's going to be something in between, the whole, not everything in the general, not only the particular, but how do you decide which of the particulars in the generality do you include? When you say, you kill him and hang him, that sounds like everyone who gets capital punishment will be hung. Ki kilat pedat. When you say kilat, the cursor, that means only the blasphemer. So if I had only that, I would think only the blasphemer. Now, if these were right next to each other in the pasuk, which they're not, but if they were, then we would say we focus on the perat. It's not nothing in the generality is included except that example. It's true, we start with the generality. Best to focus us in on the particular, and in that case we would say only a blasphemer is hung and nobody else. But now that there's a few words in between, they're not right next to each other, so that extra space comes to expand and include another case. What other case? Avodah zarah, because it's very similar to a blasphemer, and that it's the same punishment. It's also kofer ba'ikar, denying a fundamental principle. So therefore, that's the source for Rabbanan by klal uprat. We learn that not only a blasphemer, but also avodah zarah, but only those two sins, the person is stoned and then hung, but for no other crimes is one hung. ורבי אליעזר דריש ריבוי ומעוטה, והומת וטליתה ריבוי, כי קהילת מיעוט. So Rabbi Eliezer says he uses ribuy and mi'ut. Which applies differently than klal uprat. It's not just the prat, but rather it's going to be something that is similar to the detail, is going to be included, similar in some way. We have to figure out in what way is it similar. So he also says humat v'talita, that comes to expand. Ki kelat comes to limit. If these phrases were right next to each other, then we would include not only blasphemer, but also idolater. Because it's similar in all ways, as we just said. But since it's a few words away, so therefore we say it comes to include something more. And it comes to include anyone who is stoned. And that's how Rabbi Eliezer learns that we hang anyone who is stoned, just like the blasphemer, and also we include from the ribuy and mi'ut, will include avodah zarah, and since it's a few words away, we include anyone who is stoned is also hung. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen ve'amen.